Hello and welcome to episode 53 of Just Keep Writing,
a podcast for writers, by writers, to keep you writing.
I'm Marshall.
I'm Nick.
I'm Will.
I'm Brent.
And Brent, welcome to the show officially, my friend.
Yeah,
this is awesome.
I'm glad it's official.
Woo-hoo!
Yeah, so if you guys missed our announcement via social media, we announced that Brent is joining as a rotating kind of permanent host, and we're stoked to have him. And so he's part of now the intro, which is exciting stuff. But anyway, welcome to the show, buddy. We're happy to have you, and you've been here, so we might as well keep you here.
Yeah, it's a huge honor. I'm stoked. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome, dude. And then, so let's get into it. So we are fresh off an interview with Piper J. Drake. That is episode 52. So if you missed that, definitely check that out. And you guys have anything from that interview you want to throw out there, since we really didn't get to do our normal intro for that. So any reactions or anything, any feedback from that episode you guys have heard or anything?
All I know is we stay par for the course for Piper, and we talked about food.
We talked about food. We talked about happy endings and happy ever afters and various other things. It was wonderful. It was a great interview.
You can't really beat that episode.
The upside is we've known Piper for a long time. And so it was just finally nice to sit down and chat with her for sure. So it was a ton of fun. So definitely, if you haven't listened to that episode, check it out for sure. You have nothing to say about it, Will?
Oh, sorry. I loved having Piper. It was great. We had a good time. There's been a couple comments about how much they liked the ID. Did you guys see that?
The ID board? Yeah, someone commented on Twitter about how much they loved it, like that concept. And I think she responded. She was kind of saying like that board helps you crystallize the kind of moments that you love in stories and can help you kind of inspire future scenes. So I thought that was really cool. I was like, oh, that's awesome. With that in there for the interview.
No, that's awesome. Any feedback's great. I mean, and like I said, hopefully, once you listen to the episode and you know what Piper has coming down in the future, hopefully we'll get her back on to chat about that stuff, because that sounds really exciting.
Right? I think one thing I take away from that interview with Piper, and it's something we could do an entire episode on, was her experience in burnout. And then also her health conditions, where she now uses dictation almost 100% of the time now. She can't physically write anymore.
Yeah.
So I think those are two sections in that episode you guys have to check out and listen to, because she perseveres, she moves on, and she's getting stuff done.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a really cool story, and really, like I said, an awesome interview. So definitely check it out if you're new to the show. So welcome if you're new to the show, but also check out that last episode, because that interview is amazing.
And don't forget, we've got 3 other episodes of us covering mastering plot twists.
Right.
So if you were jumping into this on chapter 5, well, 1 through 4 is out there as well.
Awesome, dude. Great segue. We are going to talk about chapter 5 tonight of Mastering Plot Twists, our ongoing series. And for me, this chapter, and I'm not going to jump on Will's intro about what the chapter's about and what's going to happen, but I think because, and I'm gonna do a thing here, because a lot of us are doing the NYC Midnight short story thing right now. I feel like the plotting discussion is really important, because being under a time crunch and trying to plot and draft even a short story or flash fiction or whatever that might be, it gets having these tools I think are really important. So with that intro, nice segue, Nick. I'm gonna turn it over to Will to get us into this chapter. So, buddy.
Great. So we're going to talk about TRDs, which, if you remember that acronym, it's for plot twists, plot reversals, and moments of heightened danger.
I'm sorry, you said TRDs?
Yeah. Do you want me to repeat it?
Yeah. What does TRDs stand for once more?
It is
in the book, dude.
Plot twists, plot reversals, and moments of heightened danger. Are you just writing this down now?
Yeah, it's killing me. So if you look,
I'm rewriting it because I know it's in the book, but I also know some of our listeners may not have this book and really need to understand.
That's why I just read it.
That's why
I just said what TRDs.
Look on page 11. It covers it again.
Look, hey, I'm just, for the benefit of the listeners,
Well,
It's not bad to go over again. I like writing things down 2 or 3 times, so I memorize them that way.
I would say to the listeners, if you should get this by now. Like, this is a really good book, and you will help yourself. So you should definitely just get it.
Yeah, and like we'll talk about the book, and we have been, but like if you don't have the book at this point, we're halfway through this book. So get the book.
Yeah.
Also,
like,
too, that each episode is a chapter, but each chapter can be read without really reading the next chapter because there's a nice recap of everything that goes on.
Yeah, and I'll be entirely honest. Like, this is probably something I'm going to refer to for like quite some time after we're done, anyway. So it's one of those books you can reuse over and over.
Yeah,
it's a game changer. I feel like.
All right, so Will, now that we've covered TRDs, sort of, maybe I don't know if you had more on that, but we had to recap.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we just needed to recap that. So why don't you start? What did you enjoy from this? Like, since we're talking about like New York City Midnight and you're writing your short story, what did you take from this chapter, Marshall?
Yeah, I mean, for me in the beginning, I marked some sections, and I don't know. I don't teach creative writing. I am teaching English right now, and I do try to sprinkle in creative writing exercises, assignments for the kids. And then my kids are writing right now. My daughter entered a contest and stuff like that. And one of the things I try to stress to my students and my daughter recently is something that says on the bottom of page 110. I believe the essence of writing is rewriting. Writing isn't typing. Writing is a process of discovery and elucidation. Like the fact that, and this is something I told my daughter before she submitted, I said, okay, so instead of going through and checking for typos, punctuation and stuff like that, that's editing. That's stuff that you do before you're done. But if you're trying to craft a story, you must rewrite whole sections of that story. And I know it's difficult sometimes, but again, I think this plotting chapter will help really make that a little bit more manageable. And the other thing that stood out to me too is on 111. It says revision isn't tweaking. Revision invites you to truly re-envision your idea, your people, their longings, the emotions driving their actions, their perceptions, and your plot. Going back to plant clues and red herrings or false clues is inherent in the writing process. And this gives you, and what I like about saying that in the beginning of a chapter about plotting is, so if you are, and they do mention pantsing, which we've talked about in past episodes, but if you aren't really an outliner and you just sit down and you start writing, right? That's fine. But at some point you're going to have to go back and revise. So Nick, I know you were writing a mystery. You might have to go back and plant stuff to make things sync up, right? And I
could rewrite the whole novel.
I'm throwing this out there because I know this about you already. But it's funny. But at the same time, it's part of the revision process, and it's part of making this book happen, right? You go back and you say, okay, if at the end something happens, like, okay, they discover a thing, and I like the part in the book where it talks about the alley, like putting a door in the alley. Mm-hmm. It makes me laugh because it's like, sure, if you don't hint that there's a door in the alley before, then of course when they get there and there's a door in the alley, they're like, well, duh, there's a door in the alley. This is cliche. This is stupid, right? But if you say, if the character knows it's there, then it can be something clever you put in. But that's something you can build in revision, right? Which is what Nick's gonna have to do with his mystery, which is what we're all gonna have to do with our short stories that we got to put out, at the end of this week. Because I know for me, I'm trying to write this little sci-fi piece, and I know what I want to do, but I'm also feeling like it's not happening yet. I just want to get the thing done and then try to rebuild it backwards, if that makes sense. I know I talked a lot there, but what do you guys think?
Well, you bring an excellent point into there, because I kind of feel like this chapter is helping me become a better outliner, because I'm a pantser, and I'm a pantser through and through. It is just how I do things, and it's terrible because sometimes I submit and not even think about it twice. And it's actually going back to a conversation I was having with Will earlier today. He read something of mine and was like, you can do better on these things. But I also know just by reading it, you pants your way through it. Like, it's just how it reads. Like, And it was like, yeah, you're totally right. And so this for me is helping me kind of plot better and outline better, to be more specific in what I'm doing and the techniques that I'm doing.
Question.
And yes, answer.
My question for you at this conversation, when you
We weren't late. We had 2 minutes to spare.
no. But did you have? But I know they were almost late to this meeting. But in the course of the conversation, well, I guess what I'm asking is when Will says this reads as you pantsed it, did you guys come up? Were you guys able to figure out a way for that to come across differently in revision? Does that make sense? Because the idea, obviously, you don't want the reader thinking you pants this thing. So
right. Well,
do you know what you need to do?
Will's read enough of my stuff that he's kind of secret agent over there. But yeah, it was one of those. It was actually my first paragraph, and some other places read like, "Oh, you're figuring this out." Like this wasn't exactly planned, but it's part of it. It's something that may or may not be needed at that point. Will can speak more to it. I mean, it's his comments I'm referencing right now.
It was just more of it was boring. It was not moving me to turn the page. He had parts of it that when you read it, it didn't really need to be in there. It actually wasn't moving the short story forward. If anything, it was dragging it down. And a lot of that is from reading Nick's stuff, is him trying to like build the world, right? And me and Nick do this a lot. We always give each other our first drafts, which are always like interesting. So,
not the best idea, guys.
No, but I think it is actually.
Well, for me, our relationship, I think that's good.
Yeah,
that won't work for every writing group, but I think it works for you guys because you're comfortable with each other's stuff, right?
Yeah, well, and I know I need to rewrite this, so I'm like, Will, where are my points that you see as a reader that just don't work?
Yeah,
and I think the biggest thing of reading that, I would say for this book, for people who are pantsters, this is a book you read after you've written it. So that way you can really go back and look and use those tools to how to go forward. Because what you're really doing then when you do pants is you're intaking this book after you've already written something. You're going back and using it as a revision. And then when you start to pants your next book, you're going to intuitively have this in your brain. You're going to start thinking about these things unconsciously. And you do that through process of work. Brent, what do you want to add?
I guess for me, like, so I'm the total opposite. Like, I was a heavy outliner, like very much plotty, and so this chapter kind of like felt like home, I guess, in a way, in terms of like the crime stuff. But I've actually had to pull away from plotting as much because what I found, not in the last project, but in the project before last, I was so married to the plot that the story lost all emotion. So I had to learn to balance the two. But don't let me saying that take away from the good stuff in this chapter. Like this chapter is actually very good, especially if I think Will's point is good. Like if someone was to pants a story and come back and use this chapter to deconstruct it, they could walk away with a lot of knowledge in terms of like where their strong and weak points are. Because some people are really good at like establishing a main plot, but have no idea how to set up subplots. And I think, especially with most of us being science fiction and fantasy writers, like you have to have subplots in that genre for the most part. That's something that's an expectation of readers. So I think this chapter as a whole is good for if plotting's not your strong suit. Now, if you're like me and plotting is kind of your kryptonite, maybe not. But
and I think sorry, should I go?
You go first, and then I'll go, and then Nick.
Okay, so and I was gonna bridge what Brent said and what Will said earlier about coming back to this after you've written it. If you look on page 112, there's a nice visual on the plot, secondary plot, sorry, secondary plot 1, secondary plot 2, and the primary plot, and how those kind of intersect. Which, if you pants a story, or even if you do what I do, and I kind of do a half-ass outline, and then I write a bunch, and then I go away from the half-ass outline, and then I have to go back and like re-outline, replot, like that visual, I'm trying to figure out a way to make, because I work digitally better, I'm trying to figure out a way to make that a little bit a digital version of this plot structure, just to plug things in, if that makes sense, so that I can actually visualize it a little bit better, rather than, because if I start handwriting things or doing post-its, then it's a disaster. So unlike you guys.
I would say also, going back to what Marshall said about when you're writing you're not looking at the fine editing. You're not looking at language yet, right? The most important thing is story. Is your story grabbing the reader, bringing the emotions that you want, and is turning the page? Because when it comes to language, if you're using passive voice in certain parts, all that can come later. Get down those emotional beats. That's going to push a story forward. That's the most important thing. And I speak from experience. I just had Debbie reread Paradigm Shift before I sent it to Brent. And she really honed in on where my voice was passive. But she also really said, Will, I had to stop 3 different times in the story because I was getting so emotional. It brought me back to a certain feeling, and it kept making me want to read more, but she really had to like stop for a minute because she just kept thinking about her own life, right? And I think when you can do that, all the other language stuff is a work in progress that you can fix later.
For sure.
You know, get down those emotions. And I think to Brent's point, when he was saying, you know, sometimes I get so worked up in the plot, I forget about characters, and like, right, Brent, you said something that.
Like
and like emotion and everything.
Right.
I think this goes back to what we talked about in the part 2 of Mastering Plot Twists, which is like align your people with your conflicts. If you can remember while you're plotting to remember the whys of why your hero's doing what they're doing, why the villains are doing what you're doing, or why any character is in your story, I think those are some ways that you can emotionally ground yourself so you don't just focus on plot. Nick, you talk about next, because then I have another point, but it'll segue into a like moving forward of the book.
Yeah, perfect. I was just gonna bring up, I'm an extreme in a sense when it comes to pantsing. Brent, you're mentioning you might be a little bit more extreme on the outlining and plotting end of things, but the book is working for the both of us to kind of bring us back to center, right? And so that's actually what I really liked about this chapter. Marshall brought up the figure there on page 112, the plotting roadmap, and I think it's great because I use a linear version of something like this myself to kind of plot out, which I can show you guys later and do a little drawing or something like that. But yeah, that's all I wanted to bring to the table there on that one, is just how 2 different extremes can still use this same chapter and it brings them to center.
I would also, that brings us to our next thing, is about subplots, right? And what Marshall was saying is like, how can I incorporate this on a digital scale then, instead of me handwriting notes, because it's a mess. So I think, it says right here, it says to avoid becoming painfully confused when plotting a novel, treat each plot, the primary plot, and the 2 subplots I recommend you include as entirely separate mini novels. I think this can be really good of when you want to highlight a character's A plot, which is the main plot, and then you have like the B and C plot, which could be still from the main character, but it could be side relationships, or it could be some of the, depending on what you're writing, like what I'm writing right now, it's like I have a crew of people. So I have the main plot of my main character, but the other two B and C plots interconnect with the main plot. So I think instead of thinking it as like, where am I including it? Sometimes you don't have to write linearly. Sometimes if you know that this is going to happen, but you don't know where to include that, write that scene, write that out and then go back to your main plot, because you are instinctively going to know when the two start to emerge.
Right.
And then you can even look at the C plot and then start to see where that's going to emerge. So I'd say if you're worried about that, just write that second plot and know that you're going to catch up to it.
Yeah, and I think I'm glad you said that, because I know for me, not my current work in progress, but my novel before that had so many different POVs and like character arcs going on. It was an epic fantasy piece that may or may not ever be a thing, but thinking of it as mini novels and even writing, and I have a bunch of sections I wrote out of order and just like, I need to write this scene of this character doing this thing, and that can be part of this little mini novel that will weave its way into the main plot when it's supposed to, right? So I think that's a good rule of thumb. Sorry, Brent, you were going to say something?
No, I was going to say something. So to Will's point, kind of, something I heard, and I'm trying to remember who said it. They were saying that the first draft is you telling the story to yourself. The second draft is when you're working on telling it to somebody else. I want to say it was Neil Gaiman. I don't remember, but I always try to keep that in mind in the first draft too, is that it's okay to, if you don't quite know what to do or where to go, just to write something down real quick that you think and just keep moving forward with the story, because you want to get it out and you want to tell it to yourself. And I think this particular chapter especially is a great revision chapter. Like, you could use this for when you're done with that first draft and you don't know what the hell to fix or where to go. Like, this chapter, I feel like is really good for that.
And I like that you said that too. I've heard that a version of that as well. And I actually had to convince myself to get past a certain point. It wasn't writer's block. It was during NaNoWriMo. I was like, okay, I know I got to write this scene next, but I was like, why do I have to write this scene next? So I skipped that scene. I still haven't written that scene. I know what that scene is going to be, but it's like so, I don't want to say like visceral and kind of horror like. I need to go back and really envision what I want to do with that scene. You know what I mean? I did a version of it in a novella that I wrote, but this is in my bigger piece, and so I'm just trying to figure it out. But yeah, being able to skip scenes, write things out of order, is okay, especially if you're working digitally. You can plug that stuff in whenever you want. So.
Yeah. I have brackets to future me all the time, and I'm like, that's my problem a couple of months from now. I'm not gonna, and I think it kind of helps to not be too married to. I think this, it talks about structure being king in this, and it's like in the first draft, at least, I don't think you have to be as married to it. You should have an idea what your structure is going to be, but I'm just thinking from my point of view, like in previous projects where I was so married to the plot where it hindered.
Yeah, exactly.
I also want to say, go ahead, Nick. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, just for Brent here, Terry Pratchett is the one that said your first draft is you telling yourself the story.
Okay. I knew it was someone huge. I was like, I can't remember.
There's various other quotes to go with that from other people. So Neil Gaiman might be the second part of that. But I did look it up and I was like, wait, I know I've heard this one too. Now I got to know who.
Well, now
but it's a really good rule of thumb, though, for sure. So
yeah, no, it makes it at least for me, it takes the pressure off of being perfect. Like, again, I think this chapter is a great chapter for when you start, like, either if you're an outliner, you're sketching out the story, or if you're a pantser and when you go into revision. I think that this chapter is good for that.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's a what I'm trying to say. Oh, as far as like bracketing things to myself and stuff, I think this brings in the community aspect a little bit too, because I know I have a friend or two, one may or may not be in this digital space, that will help me with military crap that I'm definitely not pulling off in my first draft, but I'm not trying to get caught up on it. I wrote several scenes in the last couple of weeks that I know are wrong. Like just how the military is working. And Nick helped me work out part of it via text, but it's like I wrote 3 other scenes after that and I was like, I'm gonna have to get Nick on this one. And that's totally fine. But again, it's those brackets to yourself, or my bracket was ask Nick about this stupid thing that you wrote because you know this is wrong. Essentially is what I wrote in brackets, right? So that's important to keep in mind too.
Excited to do some more reading from you, Marshall.
No, it's
I like that you do that though. Because I mean it's going back to what Brent was saying too about the brackets. Like I when I get stuck and I know I need like something, the sentence isn't working the way it is now. Like it's getting my point across, but it's not great.
Yeah.
I bracket names, bracket places, bracket like
military rank, bracket.
There's been times where I'm like, okay, I'm not describing this city very well or these buildings very well. I'll just put a bracket and say, describe it better, moron, like, so I can come back to it later.
Or it's going to slow you down. You just don't feel like it. It's like, okay, write description later, you know?
Yeah, because I think there's headspaces for those world building elements that I have to be in myself.
Absolutely.
I'll even do that for plotting sometimes. Like sometimes I'll get to a point in the plot and I'll be like, I'll put it in the bracket of like, someone needs to punch somebody. I don't know. I'll come back later. Like, it's like, you can't, sometimes you know what you need to happen. You just don't know how it's going to happen. So
yeah, exactly.
I'll do that. And I think I do that, especially for subplots. I'm like, something needs to go down. I don't know what. We'll figure it out later.
Deal with it later. Future Brent will deal with it.
Yeah, I think that's really good that you bring up the subplots in that one because it just helps outline the structure and stuff like that. And I know that's the next section here that Will wants to talk about anyways.
Ooh, segue. You're the segue master there, Nick.
There is, but before we get to that, I want to talk about, I want you to reference some books that you've read recently that interwoven a subplot into the main plot.
Ooh, I got it.
Go.
Darker Shade of Magic.
Oh, talk to us. You know what, Nick? That's so funny you said that because I was just looking at it.
Oh,
I have all 3 in order up here.
Really?
Yes.
I haven't read them. I need to.
Oh my God, Marshall. I know. I'm doing the audiobook of it. I said I wouldn't, but I was like, I can't help myself. I have to. Oh my gosh. It's currently probably it's in my top 5 of books I've read or listened to in the last 5 years right now.
It's a damn good series.
So I'm actually really excited for it. There's the subplots in it tying in with the main plot is done masterfully.
Can you talk about the subplot? Like, what do you feel is the subplot that interweaves into the main plot?
Oh man, so spoilers. Okay, so spoilers here. Well, one of the main characters, okay, he's pretty much adopted. And well, you know what? Well, I'm going to hand this one off to you because I haven't finished the book. Because I know the main character, there's like 4 different versions of London. And very few people who have magic can go in between these different realms, if you will. Red London, Black London, White London, and then just London, which is Gray London, but they don't have magic, right? Your main character is adopted, and
Cal. The main character is Cal. Cal is the one who can go through all the different Londons.
His story is becoming really interesting as he teams up with Lila. You start learning a little bit more about why he's part of the royal family, but he's not a prince. But they still considered him family, right? And you're starting to his personal past that he doesn't really get into starts being revealed slowly. I feel like right now, where his magic's coming from, why he can do stuff, why a certain group of people are after him right now, all ties back to Black London, which basically they shut the magic doors on and burned it all to death. or killed everybody. I can't remember. I'm right at that part they're explaining it. So yeah, I'm only partway through the book, so I can't fully speak to this subplot for this one character, Cal. So Brent or Will, if you want to talk more to that and elaborate better.
I mean, I guess I can do it without spoiling you, Nick, since you are reading it still.
Yeah, I was gonna say I plan on reading it too. Let's not give away the big deep spoilers, but
Kel is a subplot is that Kel is doing something shifty that the royal family doesn't know about, and that shifty thing ends up tying right into the main conflict, and it's what kind of draws him into a moment of heightened danger. Since we're using TDRs, yeah, that draws him into a moment of heightened danger, and it does tie back into Black London, like Nick was saying. So I'll leave it at that. Without I feel like that's as non-spoilery as I could be with it, but yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to give a spoiler. So everyone's going to have to deal because this is the important part of subplots. Okay. The subplots for the calculating stars, which I know, Brent, I don't know if you read it, but I'm giving it away. So suck it up, Buttercup. The subplot for the main character in the calculating stars is dealing with her depression.
Mm-hmm.
That is a subplot because we start to see how it's starting to be not the main plot of trying to get off of the Earth and also get women pilots into space. That's like the main thing. We're dealing with the catastrophe. The subplot is dealing with the main character's depression. And how that interweaves is that sets the tone for all of the other relationships that she has with her husband, with her superiors, with her friends, because that depression and anxiety, that social anxiety is affecting her to have that forward vision. So to me, that is a perfect A subplot, like B subplot to the A plot.
Yeah.
So if anyone didn't read it, well, now you know part of the subplot, you'll be fine.
Oh no, and that's not too much of a spoiler. I mean, that comes out pretty early on. I love that series, and yeah, her depression and anxiety is an underlying deal with all her relationships and most of the interactions, especially her aspiring to be what she wants to be, right? And that is constantly intersecting with other folks. And then of course, eventually it gets into, how she was raised comes into it. That's another subplot, how she was raised. And when the racism stuff comes through and how she's trying to rectify that and stuff too. I think and that's why I like this chapter in that chart too, is those are little, it seems like little things sometimes, but those subplots or desires the character has, or even side adventures they have to go back into that main plot. And it's something that, again, if you're not doing it on the first draft, that's one thing, but revision is everything when it comes to making these things click, right? So
I mean, go ahead, Brian.
Ring Shout, have y'all read that one? Or
you recommended that to me.
I read it
on my list.
What's it called?
Ring Shout.
Oh,
yeah, it's by Fiyah Lit Clark. It has a really good subplot that connects into the main plot in that story. I feel like so. The main character, she has a moment in her past that she is actively trying to avoid dealing with. And it's really traumatic what happened. And she's doing her best to ignore that trauma. And she's suppressing the memory and everything without knowing it. That very trauma and memory that she's suppressing is what's drawing these Lovecraftian kind of entities to her, because they feel like, basically, there's a point in the story. This might kind of be a little bit of a spoiler, where the Lovecraftian creatures are like, "You're Black. You've had this horrible thing done to you. You've had this horrible thing done to all of your people. Why won't you let us consume your hate and let you have the power to hurt everyone that's ever hurt you?" It was like, why? And so she has to make this choice, basically, of she has this moment where she's like, you're damn right. Yeah, like, and it's like her trauma, comes back. She was like, this horrible thing did happen to me. Why shouldn't I take this power? So it's a little subplot that ends up playing, I think, almost perfectly into the climax of the story. So that's a recent example, I think, of subplot colliding right into the main plot.
And it's called Ring Shout?
Yeah, Ring Shout. Yeah. It's very good. It's about to have a TV show out of it, I think.
That one, yeah?
Yep,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the cover plays into the story too. Like, I love when covers do that. Like, yeah.
I'm adding that to the list. Thank you. All right. Nick, were you going to say something, or are we going to move on to the next part? What were you going to say, Nick?
I mean, just to kind of bring it around more to Will's example with calculating the stars, if you guys kind of want to know more about that book and the series, you can check out episode 38, our interview with Mary Robinette Kowal, where we actually discuss her most recent release in that series. And we do talk about the subplot and how she worked that in, and a lot of other different issues into her series. Spoiler free.
Damn, dude, you are segueing all over the damn place, man.
Nick, like, what is going on?
Are you on a skateboard? What's going on?
Did you do cocaine or something?
I'm on a Segway.
He's on a Segway.
Hey,
I'm just from one thing to the next. I love it.
I'm just trying to do what I can to make sure we're delivering the best content. I actually really like callbacks to other episodes. And so personally, I want to get better about that. So if, you guys see me do that more, let me know. If I miss something, let me know.
You're killing it. I love it. All right. So, what's next, Will?
Let's go to the final twist, right? Okay. To add a final twist, you need to have planned for the surprises from the start of your story by using one of these 3 structure techniques: a seamless integration, an unreliable narrator, revealed, or a wider lens. So let's unpack that first part. 118, if you're looking for it.
Yeah, I'm on that page. Right now.
I was just reading. I was just reading through it.
I wasn't sure if everyone was.
I look very.
Well, I have a comment about the seamless integration. I find there are authors that do this really, 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 really well. I mean, obviously, most authors should do this well. But Scalzi stands out to me, and so does Ari Salvatore. If you want to get crazy with. Are you laughing because I give the same examples all the time?
Yeah, I think everyone is.
All right, fine.
I'm not laughing at you. I just, when you do that, I just want to pinch your cheeks because I think I love that you go back to them because they're your favorite.
They're my favorite. Okay, let me find someone else. Yeah. Hold on. No, I'll find something else.
I want you to talk about Salvatore though, because
it's like me going back to Daniel Jose Older. How many times do I even mention him?
I'll talk about Salvatore in a minute, but I'm also going to bring up an oldie classic because he's got a sequel out. And say what you want about Ready Player One, but he does a really good job of putting even though it's a first person narrator, does a really good job of bringing the subplots in with. He's got the antagonist characters and he's got the side characters with Daito and Shoto, and like all those things seamlessly integrate into the end. And that climax is intense because of all of that, right? Because of everything he built coming into that. As far as Ari Salvatore goes, obviously that's all kind of D&D-ish, but at the same time, he does all these POVs, right? But by the time you get to the third act of his books, even though he switches POVs, you're switching POVs in the same relative space. And you've been with these characters this entire time, and you know everybody's stake when it comes to the end. And so when he gets to the end, that's why it's so impactful, because it's like, holy crap, these people are fighting. I know exactly why. You know why the quote unquote bad guys are fighting. If Drist and the Companions of the Hall are fighting, the Bandaries and Menzo Baranzan, you've been with the matron mother the whole time. You know exactly why she's trying to do what she's doing, and you know why the Companions of the Hall are trying to do what they're doing. And when all that comes together, it's well crafted. And I know he plots like crazy. I know that. And
how many books in that series for Dritz, right? And Dritz alone?
And and being able to bring all of those subplots from all of those books from that entire Forgotten Realms verse is pretty good. So I know I go back to it a lot, Will. So I just had to defend myself a little bit.
I want to go back though. I want to challenge you though now.
Okay, sure.
Because that is great for seamless integration.
That's what I was talking about.
No, I know. But can you think of, like, I'm even doing this myself while we were talking. Can you think of anyone who gave a seamless integration, but then a surprise twist when looking back, it'd be like, oh my God, I should have saw that coming. Do you feel like, does R.A. Salvatore do that as well? Or can you think of something else that will do those two things?
Yes, but I don't like my answer.
Okay, just tell me your answer anyway. I want to hear.
Okay, so because of all the, and you guys will know when I say the author why I'm saying this. Chuck Palahniuk does this really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
He does this very, very, very well. I have not read his most recent stuff. I met him in real life. That didn't go that well. But he does this really, really well. Unreliable narrators. And I'm not just talking about Fight Club, the classic ones. I'm talking about you dive into Choke, you dive into any of these other ones, Invisible Monsters, some of the ones I read around that time frame. He always has something there, and it's like, why didn't I see that before? But he crafts it in such a way that you're like, well, I never would have got it, but I love that I'm here now. You know what I'm saying? So,
yeah.
That's my answer for that.
That's great. Does anyone else before I go have someone that seamlessly interweaves all those plots, subplots, and then gives you a twist that you're like, wow, I didn't see that coming, but that makes so much sense?
Max Gladstone. I know I always bring him up, but like, yeah, he's like.
Don't listen to Will. Brent, you talk about Max Gladstone.
He's like my writing hero. But yeah, Max Gladstone. He does such a good job with that. Like, he'll bring like the last craft sequence book I read. There was basically a plot about a little girl like praying to a gargoyle that he somehow managed to connect to a war for a city, and it all just came together. And I'm just like, how the hell did he do that? But and it did not.
He did it in 3 Parts Dead too.
Yeah. Well,
he's really good at that.
I just had an idea. This is for later.
Okay, we'll talk.
Yeah. Nick, do
Are you just
have
embedding
one?
things I have to cut out now, or what? What's happening?
No. I have a total idea because this sticks into what we're talking about now.
All right, cool.
Can I go next? Because I'm dying to go next.
Please go.
Yes.
Why don't you go first sometimes instead of asking us? Just go.
Yeah. Will?
No,
and then we can berate you when you bring up Daniel Jose Older.
Mm-hmm. No. I'm going to bring up 2 people that we like. Mary Robinette's Ghost
Talkers.
Ghost Talkers. Yeah, I want to say Ghost Hunters, but that's the show. Ghost Talkers. She weaves her A plot, her B plot, and then at the end there is a big twist that you're looking at and you're like, almost near the end, that you're like, oh my God, why didn't I see that coming? I actually would love to have Mary Robinette on to go through the process of how she wrote it, because I really felt like she wrote that book almost like a mystery, and exactly what this describes.
Sadly, I have that book and I haven't read it yet. I have it. I have it on my Audible.
Honestly, it's just, she is such a good writer and craftsperson. Like, I just love her brain. She is like off the hook. I'm reading The Glamorous Histories right now, the first one, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna read all the rest of them now. The next one, though, which I don't know if Brent read this one, was The First Mistborn. I think when you get to the end, I think things seamlessly come together, and then all these things are suddenly coming out that answers a lot of questions, but then also gives us more questions for the next book. And I think
the next book. Mm-hmm.
I think what he did, but don't you feel though when he wrote that with Mistborn, you still felt like it was a finished novel?
Yeah,
right?
No, that first book can easily stand by itself, but you're right. It does. He brings all of the plots together masterfully. That's so well done. And at the end, you're right. You're like, well, I'm bummed I didn't figure that out, but at the same time, I'm glad I didn't because this is an amazing ride. But it leads into the stuff that he leaves at the end is sets up the rest of that trilogy really, really well. And he weaves those into the second and third books and even into the other set as well later on, which is really good.
He does that wider lens thing like masterfully. Like
really well.
Always, the books feel complete, but you also realize like, oh, this world is much bigger than than you realize, and things are going on in this world totally outside of the main stuff. I dig that. Like I it's probably why I love fantasy and science fiction so much. That I want to know or feel like that the story I'm reading is an important story, but it's not the only important story happening in this world. And I think Sanderson does that to like he's a masterclass in that.
And what I think is interesting about that too is he gives you the opportunity to put the series down. Like you get a complete story, but if you want to stay in this world for a while with lots of words and lots of pages, you certainly can. And he does that really, really well too. So yeah, I like that you brought that up.
Anytime. Nick, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I've got plenty to add if time will allow it, Marshall.
Here we go. One more time. I don't want this to be an hour and a half, but yeah, go for it.
Look, I'm just trying to pull up. Yes, found it. Okay, so I've got a couple books to mention here, right? The seamless integration. I feel like you guys nailed it. You no more examples needed for that. But I wanted to bring up for the unreliable narrator, Agatha Christie. I might have to bring her up. I've read 2 of her books now. Like she does a really good job at that. But she also incorporates the wider lens with that as well, to where she leaves just enough behind for you to pick up on things. And in reverse, 2 authors that I feel like do a really good job of wider lens mixed with the unreliable narrator. It's a hard word for me, apparently.
Okay.
Will's just going to like these ones, but Lee Bardugo, Six of Crows, and then Mur Lafferty, Six Wakes. If you look at those with a wider lens first, they're both leaving plenty of clues behind, plenty of things behind for you to pick up on, but the narrator's not right there leading you along the way. So unless Will looks like he disagrees.
Oh no, I don't disagree. I was just thinking.
He's clearly thinking about something else, though.
I was thinking about Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn and also The Guest List by Lucy Foley. I think they both employ unreliable narrators, but the pacing is so quick. And the thing is, you can really go back and read those books and be like, wow, all the pieces were right here. And that is because she plotted it out and she did that seamless integration. And you were like, wow.
Yeah, and I also wanted to mention 2 short stories as well. One is The Unrepented by Derek Bowden, which you can find on Escape Pod right now. I listened to this one. I thought it was great. It actually touches on all 3. Mixing kind of, you can look at it either way, but definitely my recommendation on that one for the seamless integration. Escape Pod episode 766. And then also for seamless integration, I'm going to go with our good friend Aaron and Sour Milk Girls.
Yeah.
Which you can find with Clark's World, I believe.
Yes, Clark's World. And I agree with you on that for sure. I'm just looking through my list and I'm trying to find something else, but I think we have plenty of examples.
Yeah.
Another one. For unreliable narrator, Pierce Brown in the Red Rising series. His main character, Darrow, is he's unreliable not because he's lying, but because his perceptions of things color everything, and like, and when the twist happens, or when you find out that a character wasn't being completely honest, it never feels like forced. It totally feels like, oh, of course, it makes sense. Daryl didn't see that coming because he was too focused on this, or he was too worried about that. And Pierce Brown does that to like, I don't know how the hell he does it, but he does it. It's good.
He's amazing. That whole series is really good. I feel
Man, that's
like
my favorite part of the episode. Let's just talk more about books.
There's honestly a series that I've never mentioned on this show, and I don't think I have not finished the trilogy. I read the first two a few years ago. I don't know if you guys have read anything by Jay Kristoff, but Nevernight. Have you ever read Nevernight? Yeah. Okay, so I'm looking through my list and I was like, I have never talked about Nevernight. That shit is insanely good. Oh, insanely good. And I think the seamless integration, I think, happens so well in that novel, for sure. So and also leading into the next book, I think I'm close to finishing the second book. I think for some reason I put it down, but I'm looking at my list right now. But that first book is phenomenal. So good. Right?
Like, just fucking like it's the way he does it. Like, you could not have convinced me that a fantasy book with footnotes would be that entertaining. And it's just the way he twists the character. And he's a pantser, actually. So that's what it makes it so interesting. Yeah, like, he's a pantser, but you would not think it reading the book. You would think he intricately plotted out all of this shit, but he just goes for it.
Wow. Yeah, I don't know that much about him, but that was the first book I read by him, and I was like, holy crap, I love this. And I listened to it in an audio book, like camping a few years ago, and I'm like, and thankfully I picked up the second one. I started the second one, but for some reason I put it down. But I would like to go back to that series because that's the way that, I mean, yeah, the footnotes and in audio format, it's really interesting the way they weave that in too. It's really, really well done. So if you guys haven't checked that out, Nevernight, Jay Kristoff is legit good.
Please, it is amazing. Yeah.
Will, I just recommended a book to you. Did you write it down or what? I mean, I feel like
he's already read it. Come on.
I've already read it. I love it though. It's really good.
Thank you so much. Okay, cool. I just thought I was looking through my list. And I was like, maybe there's something on here Will hasn't read. Turns out, untrue.
I read it. I loved it. I thought it was. I want to see if I can really good example. Okay, go ahead.
Mark Lawrence.
Also, too, is Brent reads just as much as I do.
I know, but you've been harassing me longer than Brent, and I like Brent.
Brent also doesn't give us a 5-page list of book recommendations every time we talk.
True statement. All right, so let's wrap this up, boys. I think this is a really good chat, by the way. I'm really excited about this. So how do you want to end it, Will? What are you thinking? You got something else to add?
I want everyone to just think about their stories. If you're in your work of progress, which is a novel, think about your your primary plot, and then think of your two subplots and how they can interweave and how you can actually plan for surprises by really utilizing what, we're talking about in this episode. And maybe this will create like a brainstorming session. Maybe you'll think, okay, I'm going to look at my subplots as like mini novels or novellas, and I'm going to include them. Like, go on with your bad self, you Brandon Sanderson newbies. And, I'm just like, bring it.
Yeah. And I would say, actually. Sorry, what'd you say?
I said, this helps me because I keep thinking, like, can I write more about Paradigm Shift, my short story? Which I know I can. I can always write more. But then I'm like, this is how I know what subplots I would include to make it to, like, even more of a plot. So there you go.
And to add to that, I would lean into some of the stuff we talked earlier on the episode of bracketing things, leaving things, writing scenes out of order, stuff like that. And really having the revision process in your mind when you're working on your first draft, because you are going to have to go back to this at some point. So if you haven't quite figured it out yet, keep going, just keep writing, and then come back to the other stuff later and revise it. And you'll make it beautiful in revision, right?
Well, that's the whole concept here is rewriting is writing.
Revision is rewriting.
I have to say that being with the three of you and knowing the three of you, it's actually made me enjoy rewriting more than the initial writing, because you've taught me that it really is about the rewriting is like getting more detailed and world building more. And I think that's really important, because sometimes when you're first starting, you're like, well, I need to write something and it needs to be great. I need to have everything figured out. And that's just not the actuality of the truth.
The actuality is probably going to be crap, and you're going to have to rewrite a lot of it, but it's going to be a lot better the second and third and fourth, fifth time you rewrite it. So
yeah, my fifth draft is much better than my first.
Fair enough.
So I kind of want to mention this as well. Are you guys not sold on this book yet? Have you not purchased this book, Mastering Plot Twists by J.K. Cleland? No? Well, just so you guys know, in chapter 5, we didn't cover everything. We want to leave a little mystery out of this. So if you need also to learn more about controlling pace, linear progression, nonlinear progression, that is covered in this chapter as well. So go out, you knuckleheads, get this book, follow along with us, and just keep writing.
Are you doing cocaine tonight? Like,
I just like that there was a sneaky ad at the end of like a book that's not sponsoring the show. I love everything about it. That made me so happy.
This has been Just Keep Writing, a podcast for writers by writers to keep you writing. Check out our website at justkeepwriting.org. You can find links to our social media and Discord channel in the show notes, as well as any other links mentioned during the show. If you want to support the show, the best way to do that is patreon.com/justkeepwriting. Thanks for listening.
Now just keep writing.